In one of our older videos on Portugal's contributions to the Second World War as a neutral nation, we mentioned a Portuguese hero by the name of Aristides de Sousa Mendes, known to many as the Portuguese Schindler. While the exact number may never be known, this man saved hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish and non-Jewish refugees during World War II by granting them the documents such as passports and visas, which allowed them to escape German-occupied Europe. For this, Aristides was punished and his family name was stained, though his story doesn't end there. Against the behest of a dictator, his children fought to clear his and their own name, and the universe, or someone else Aristides would have believed, heard their toil. This is the story of Aristides de Sousa Mendes, a Portuguese hero whose saint-like sacrifice we cannot forget. So, who was the man and how did he have the power to save so many lives? Aristides de Sousa Mendes was born on the 19th of July 1895 in the town of Cabanas de Narrator in the central region of Portugal, one day after his twin brother Caesar. With noble aristocratic blood in his veins and with a judge for a father, it was clear from the get-go that the brothers would somehow be involved with law or politics, and this was precisely the case. Aristides and Caesar studied law at the University of Coimbra in Portugal, and while his brother went on to become a foreign minister, Aristides married a Portuguese woman by the name of Maria Angelina Coelho de Sousa and soon after pursued a career as a consular. Aristides and Maria traveled the world for Aristides' work, making babies all the while. Even then, however, it wasn't all paradise, and Aristides' rebellious streak started to show, even if some of his actions were indeed a little questionable. After some trouble in Brazil, Aristides had a run-in with the US Department of State while serving as a consular in America. On returning to Portugal, Aristides was employed as the consul in Vigo, Spain, and he was then sent to Antwerp, Belgium. Some 5 years later, 2 of poor Aristides' children lost their lives, and 4 years after that misery, Aristides became the Consul-General of Bordeaux, France, a position in which he had jurisdiction over all of southwest France. The year was now 1938, and Aristides could only imagine what horrors would soon befall the world. Even before World War II broke out in September 1939, Jews and other minorities in Germany were subjected to the first flames of what would evolve into the Holocaust. Since 1932, Portugal lived in the shadow of the dictator known as António de Oliveira Salazar, and fearing that Portugal could not bear the financial weight of millions of refugees, or that his dictatorial regime could not bear the ideological influx of said millions, he tightened the borders, knuckling down on Portugal's immigration policies. But this only encouraged these Nazi-fleeing refugees to forge their way into Portugal by means of fake passports and such, and between September and December 1939 alone, some 9,000 refugees entered the country, many with falsified documents. From there, Salazar only made his borders more impassable, and that was when Aristides came along. But before we go there, it must be said that some argue Salazar did not shut the door on the refugees for their ethnicity alone, rather on those he thought lacked the means to one day leave Portugal, or those who, as we said, threatened his dictatorial rule. In fact, Salazar even telegrammed the Nazi Party via the Portuguese embassy in Berlin in September 1939 and made it clear to them that Portuguese law made no racial discriminations and would not specifically discriminate against Jewish Portuguese citizens. Now, back to Aristides. Recall, Aristides was at this point a general consul in southwest France, and the world was starting to feel the heat of the Second World War. Aristides was closer to the fire than he would have been in Portugal, and most of those poor souls fleeing Hitler's wrath in hopes of finding refuge in Portugal would first have had to physically pass through Aristides' consular jurisdiction. It started when Aristides granted visas to an Austrian historian who lost his nationality as a result of the Nuremberg laws and an anti-Franco activist. Both of these people wouldn't have been granted refuge under the rules of Salazar's second border tightening, which deemed Circular 14, and for this, Aristides was given a slap on the wrist, warned that any further violations would result in much more than a wrist slapping. While it may have had a little to do with Aristides' heroism, it's worth noting that the man was unfaithful to his wife while in France, seducing and impregnating a French musician by the name of André Sibial, who later unveiled Aristides' adultery to the public during a cathedral mass. During and after the fall of France, Aristides helped a number of other refugees attain the documents they required, though this was only the start, and it took the moral fortitude of a rabbi for Aristides to understand just why he was put on earth. This rabbi was Champfy Kruger, whom Aristides met either by chance or divine will. To the rabbi and his family, Aristides offered his service, though the rabbi refused, willing to accept a visa which would have granted him and his family passage into Portugal only if Aristides offered his brothers and sisters the same. Only by brothers and sisters, the rabbi meant all the Jewish refugees in Bordeaux. Aristides began by issuing 40 visas, though when France buckled under the weight of the Germans calling for an armistice, Aristides' purpose was clearer than ever. One of his sons recalls the exact moment when his father knew exactly what he had to do. "My father got up. He was full of punch. He washed, shaved, and got dressed. Then he strode out of his bedroom, flung open the door to the chancellery, and announced in a loud voice, 'From now on, I'm giving everyone visas. There will be no more nationalities, races, or religions.' When one of his daughters tried to dissuade him, Aristides responded, 'I would rather stand with God and against man than with man and against God.' On that same day, he issued 247 visas. On the next, 216, and over the next 3 days after that, 350. Soon after Bordeaux was bombed on the 19th of June 1940, Aristides went to the city of Bayonne, where he issued more visas, though he was soon ratted out and all subsequent visas with his signature on them were invalidated. Aristides then went to Hendaye, another settlement in southwest France, and issued visas there a while, in which time he also ordered the Portuguese vice consul in the French city of Toulouse to accept all transit visa applications. With Salazar on his tail and the Spanish people in unrest, fearful of having thousands of refugees pass through Spain to get to Portugal, all visas issued by Aristides were soon declared null and void. Salazar called Aristides back to Portugal on the 24th of June 1940, though the man didn't get there until the 8th of July, during which time he issued even more visas and even physically led a group of refugees over the border, his rebellious streak in full effect. Many of the refugees to which Aristides issued visas were later allowed into Portugal, thanks to the work of two Portuguese men by the names of Augusto Isaac de Essegai and Moses Bensepat Amzalak. That was Aristides' final hurrah. He now had to pay an unjust price. For granting thousands of visas in direct violation of Salazar's instructions, Aristides was, officially, punished by working 1 year at half salary, and while he got off rather easy in this regard, it was nothing compared to the man's unofficial punishment. Aristides and his family were cast aside by society, blacklisted, disgraced. The family were forced to survive out of Jewish soup kitchens during the war, and after it, Portugal's dictator Salazar got all the glory for saving thousands of refugees. Aristides fought to wipe the black dot from his family name, though in 1945 he suffered a stroke which rendered him paralyzed and unable to work. From here, his financial situation got significantly worse, and his sons and daughters, of which 15 were still alive, struggled to find meaningful employment in Portugal and were forced to leave. Crippled and abandoned by his colleagues, friends, and even some of his relatives, Aristides was already enduring more than most could, only then for his wife to perish, after which he married his French mistress, whose spending habits brought him to poverty's doorstep. Aristides' twin brother, Caesar, did all within his power to help, and one of Aristides' many sons, Sebastião, published a story about the injustice endured by his father, but it did little to help. On the 3rd of April 1954, Aristides himself perished with only one of his nieces at his side, though even in death there was some light. In response to his charges, Aristides denied nothing, stating, "It was indeed my aim to save all those people whose suffering was indescribable. When I left Bayonne, I was applauded by hundreds of people, and through me, it was Portugal that was being honoured." Though Aristides had been dead for about 7 years at this point, his sacrifice was applauded once again in 1961, when David Ben-Gurion, the Prime Minister of Israel, had 20 trees planted by the Jewish National Fund in Aristides' name. After that, Israel's official Holocaust memorial, Yad Vashem, recognized Aristides, though Salazar was still in power at that point, and the true story of Portuguese Schindler had yet to be told there. It wasn't until democracy was once again established in Portugal that Aristides' case was reopened and recognized as, in quotation marks, having refused to be an accomplice to Nazi war crimes, though this sat with the government for over a decade. It wasn't until 1987 that the Portuguese Republic took wind of Aristides' children's efforts to clear their father's name, after which they awarded the dead man an Order of Liberty Medal, one of the greatest honours of Portugal. The year after, all charges against Aristides were officially dismissed, and since then there have been various efforts to rehabilitate Aristides' name and share with the world the story of his sacrifice. This video is very much one of them. But what do you think? Did you know about Aristides de Sousa Mendes before this? Do you think he's truly deserving of the nickname the Portuguese Schindler? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. And just before you go guys, if you want access to our behind the scenes Discord where you can see how we all work and one exclusive video per month, then make sure you check out our Patreon page. If you want to listen to the music we play behind this video unobstructed, check out our music channel where you can use some of the songs for your own creative projects too. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on our Discord, Facebook and Instagram. All these links are in the description below. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope you learned something new.